And well, with global energy demand predicted to double by 2050, South Africa is eyeing the opportunity of shale gas exploration in the Karoo. An estimated 485 trillion cubic feet of reserves are said to be able to provide South Africa with cheaper base load and mid-merit power. Joining us for a look at shale gas exploration in the Karoo and its impact on potential supply moving forward is Bonang Mohale, South Africa country chairman at Shell. Thanks so much, Bonang, for joining us today.
Alishia, thank you so much for having me.
Well, shale gas exploration in the Karoo has been getting a lot of attention, and to a large extent with an environmental basis. But, you know, this year we had results of a poll that was commissioned in 2011 by Shell come to the fore, showing that South Africans want more information about what effects shale gas production can actually have on economic growth in the country, on power supply, etc. What are we potentially looking at here when it comes to shale gas and its relationship to electricity supply in the country?
Yeah, I think we have absolutely no clue as to the quantum of the step change that can be provided by shale gas. We just know that we are sitting on the 5th largest gas reserves in the world. And we also know that when countries get 2 TCFs, not 485 that we are purported to have, it justifies building a pipeline. So really what we're looking at here has been confirmed by our experience in North America, where we've been doing this as Shell for probably the last 38 years, but by the industry by about 60 years, having successfully hydraulically fractured about 1.1 million wells. And indeed, the case for gas is compelling indeed, because first of all, it is abundant, it is affordable, and indeed, it is acceptable from the environmental
To what
point of
extent will it work to alleviate energy concerns, and what kind of timeline are we facing? Are we looking at here?
2 things. In the US of A, 5 years before they discovered gas, they were overly dependent for their energy needs, mostly from the Middle East. At that time, a country and a group of countries that were not particularly, in fact, friendly to them. They discovered shale gas and they really exploited it with utmost respect, indeed, to the environment. In 2010, the US of A had created an $80 billion industry. They were a net energy exporter. So as Shell, we also thought, let's commission a study by the late Tony Twine of Econometrics to come up with a simple model. And he really looked at 2 scenarios that are absolutely ultra-conservative. On the one hand, he says, what would happen if we were to look at only 5% and 10% bringing this gas to production? At 5%, he says, not us. We will create about 300,000 jobs. We will add 80 billion into the fiscus. We'll grow the GDP by 3.3%. At 10%, which is really only 50 TCFs, the jobs move from 300,000 to 700,000. The GDP growth moves from 3.3 to 9.6%. And indeed, the injection into the fiscus moved from 80 billion to 200 billion. So by order of magnitude, if you think that the entire coal mining industry in 2010 grew the GDP by 1.8%, you can see how phenomenal the opportunity that is gazing us in the eye.
Certainly those are impressive targets, but you've got to question expertise in South Africa to exploit it properly and leverage off this opportunity that presents itself.
Yeah, you see, I think South Africans are very hard on themselves. This is the only country in the world where we are now wanting to drill 5 kilometers into the belly of the earth in gold mining. So the deepest gold mines in the world have always been here. But it's surprising that for the last 150 years, we have never even thought of putting an underground to put this skill into good use. So we're really not too concerned about the skills, because if we can go 4 kilometers down, which is, by the way, where the shale rock actually sits, between 2,500 to 4,000 meters below the ground, I think we can access it. What the people of Karoo are concerned about is, where are we going to get the water? Are we going to contaminate their aquifers? And indeed, what about the environmental impact? And our answer to that is that as Shell, throughout the years, we have really demonstrated through deeds rather than just articulation that we can indeed responsibly go and harness the energy provided by shale gas with the utmost respect to the environment and indeed to the people. So for us, it's not either or, it's both and together at the same time.
And so we've got environmentalists concerned about, you know, just how responsible and reliable a kind of process this is going to be, shale gas exploration in the Karoo. How reliable a domestic energy source are we looking at?
The challenge that we face as South Africa is that about 20% of our 50 million population is without any form of energy whatsoever. That's 10 million people. So, and these are the people who wake up every morning, they get to the bush, they cut a few trees just to be able to boil some water. And we watch helplessly every year from Alexander to Kukule to Nyanga to Emondlo in KZN when these shacks are incinerated because people are still using candles, they're still using illuminating paraffin really for cooking. When we could provide an alternative, sustainable form of energy that will reduce the CO2 footprint by 50 to 70%. That is 1/10 cheaper than coal-fired power station, and that can really
1/10 cheaper.
Yes.
How does that translate into cost for the consumer? Because affordability in terms of access to something like this is the big question.
Yeah, Alishia, you're absolutely correct. I think our experience in the past is that, especially in the US of A, you'd have seen that the price of energy has come down because you now have different sources of energy that are competing. When we find this gas, it is anticipated that the first use for this gas will be electricity generation through combined cycle gas turbines. We'll sell it to Seckam. We can put it in the size no bigger than this coffee table, and then you plug it into the grid, thereby addressing the 15% reserve margin that we have now obliterated.
And then reducing our dependence on imports, because I came across figures, I mean, around 60 to 70% of oil consumption is imported. 60% of natural gas is also imported from Mozambique.
In fact, South Africa has never had its own indigenous crude. The 12 rand that you and I pay at the pump for our petrol, if you look at it, about 7 rand goes towards the procurement of crude, 3 rand towards taxes. We get about 52 cents as wholesalers, and the retailers get about 94 cents. So a large part of that is really going outside of the country. And if we were to keep it with our own indigenous crude, first we'll save 7 rand, we'll create jobs, we'll help with the balance of payment, and then over a period of time, we can create a brand new industry that will provide not only the people of the Karoo, but the 50 million South Africans with energy, environmental, but also economic benefit.